Trust me, transubstantiation is not a joyride. As usual, I am only writing down my thoughts, which, of course, you are not obligated to follow. By the way, I have never stated that my articles are flawless and right, and that is why I consider them to be reflections of my ideas rather than opinions. I have written a lot about the path of theosis. My conclusion is that man ultimately seeks the transubstantiation of his being, which is his consciousness upgrade. This process is an attempt by the human mind to understand the excess of creation and to propose the path of change. How does this mental operation form? The human being, in the course of his creation, acquires all the required operations for his survival and growth. I remember from my school years an axiom of biology saying that ontogenesis follows phylogeny. The human embryo follows all the phases that the human tribe followed, from a single cell to a complex organism. Everything that was earned throughout millions of years of evolution is stored in one cell and is operating in the new human being. Some scientists call the work of the lower brain operation of the psychic brain, meaning that its essential functions are connected to the instincts of the inferior mental operations. I agree, since the first thing a human must do is try to survive. If he weren't afraid of the gigantic animals, he would be their lunch. If he feared the small ones, he wouldn't have lunch. In plain words, the formation of the first part of the brain is owed to the operations of a human's senses. But even in his early years, the man continues to feed his brain with emotions that keep making synapses, which gradually enables him to gain a more complete mental function. We can say with certainty that the brain's function is mostly based on our senses and emotions, since they handle the creation of new synapses. When we talk about rage, anger, fear, love, tenderness, we talk about feelings and how they are managed by us. The human brain is the instrument that manages our aesthetic state, forming our mentality step by step. The human brain, therefore, is not solely a management tool for the mind, but also the organ that manages both our soul and spirit, and this is the key to human transubstantiation. That means that the human is planning and living his life according to his brain requirements, whose function, as we mentioned, is based on the existing synapses. Put simply, the man devises a life plan that steers him in life. Along comes a day that, for reasons of its own, he changes this plan. The way to succeed is to change the way he has learned to program his life so far. But that requires changing the synapses of his brain. This process is challenging and requires long-term work on oneself, together with a complete review of the way he was thinking. The changing technique has only recently been described by many modern scholars, but is none other than the old classic initiatory process, which for some is the activation of the human will. The fundamental difficulty, though, is that you don't just get up one morning, throw away the old plan, and activate a new one. You need to change your orientation with the help of many actions, because your old plan is already spreading into your future activities. If you do not let them in the past, they will force you to take steps that are not in line with your new plan. That is the problem of all those who believe that some things can be accomplished simply by the touch of a teacher's hands in a zealot's head. If only that were the case, the world would be such a better place. To sum it up, the regeneration of the man to a new way of thinking requires a long process that relies on the transformation of the plan of his life. This is based on the activation of new synapses in his brain, synapses that must be achieved through a different way of operating his aesthetic and mental state. It all starts with the reformation of being. That is achieved through upgrading his personality. For this process, to know oneself is not the desired outcome, but the first step. As a process, we find it difficult, and we are right. It's hard to get to know ourselves, but it is even harder to change ourselves. We usually alter only certain aspects of us because we are afraid of something worse. Fear is the primary motive for change, and not a desire for a meaningful mutation. This, unfortunately, is interpreted as a change that derives from our inferior feelings, and not from our superior mental functions. In plain words, from the part of our being that is bathed in the light of our transcendent self. What does that mean? It means that when the change is because of our psychic brain, then our life plan doesn't change in the right direction. For example, if we stop smoking out of fear of dying, although it is the right move, it does not change the way we face fear. Our motivation is not the alteration or manipulation of fear, so we reinforce it even more in our daily actions. I acknowledge the need to adapt to scientific demands for healthy living. I am focused on revising our life plan to free us from the past and guide us as self-determined beings in our chosen future. The only suggestion I would like to make to those who want to start the transubstantiation process has two pillars. The first is the process of double observation. We have to observe what is happening around us by analyzing both its components, the external influence of others and the internal confrontation by ourselves. The second pillar is to question our beliefs, because unfortunately they are based on our character. If we see our everyday life in this prospect that these two pillars offer us, we soon discover that the plan we have put in action is not the one that will lead us to the desired result. The first step is always the hardest. When we look with a rational mind the way we have structured our path, we will be able to re-examine our course and, with the proper corrective moves, to reach a new starting point, free of past mistakes. Now we will be ready to implement the building procedures of the new plan, which, since through the effort we have already made, we have discharged our behavior from any primitive feelings and mental commitments of the first period. The modern man will reasonably question if this effort has a severe effect. It is one question I cannot answer. The evolutionary way, however, is not something we decided to follow in a moment's thought. It is not a cognitive course that requires an apprenticeship in the new age. It is a state of being that, when and if it takes place, it brings us difficulty in adopting or continuing to follow the way we lived. As a state, it is a different way of living and being of life itself. It will be alive in us, looking for ways to make its presence noticed. By explaining its directions falsely, we choose to take the wrong way, and mistakenly believing we are fulfilling its desires. Eventually we shall realize our mistake. Let's just hope that it won't be too late.